Hey friends, welcome back to Mental Notes with Matt, the podcast where we explore what it means to live honestly, feel fully, and show up for our lives in a real way. Today's guest is someone I've looked up to for a long time, not just because of what he teaches, but how he lives it. David Gandelman is a meditation teacher, author, and host of multiple popular podcasts, including the Grounded Sleep podcast and Energy Matters. He's also the founder of Meditation School, where he brings together ancient spiritual wisdom, modern insight, and a healthy dose of humor to help people build a real, sustainable practice. In this episode, we talk about why people give up on meditation, how rest and creativity are deeply connected, and what it means to show up with grounded presence in a chaotic world. And here's your heads up. We're going to close the episode with a short 2-minute meditation led by Dave. So if you've been needing a reset, I hope you'll stick around for that. So let's dive in. Dave, it's great to see you. As I was saying before I hit the record button, it's been a couple decades, I think, since we've spoken back at the Rutgers days, and I'm really grateful that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, I've been following your life and your journey, just us being Facebook friends, but it's good to finally see you and talk to you again.
Yeah, it's nice to go beyond just scrolling through people's lives and living vicariously through them in different ways. And I've certainly done that with you. I mean, you've led a really incredible life the last 20 years. So I guess let's start with your journey. You know, you've trained in the Himalayas, you led retreats in Hawaii, and now reach thousands through your podcast and your platform. So what first drew you to meditation, and how has your understanding of it shifted since you started doing it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I actually started meditating before I met you in college. I started as a teenager when I was 16, just through reading books and self-study. And then, after Rutgers, I went and lived in Europe, in Spain for a year, where I partied hard as a 22-year-old might. And then I went and lived. I shook that off, I suppose, or I got my fill. It was one of those things where, dad catches you smoking and makes you smoke a whole pack of cigarettes and then you never smoke again.
Yeah.
I drank myself to the point I was like, never want to do that again. And I never really have drank since. I mean, just a tiny bit here or there. And I went from there and lived in India in the ashrams and studied with a lot of teachers in the Himalayas and studied things, traditions like Hinduism and Zen, Buddhism, Vedanta, read every book I can get my hands on, and just went really deep. And then that eventually turned into my career as a meditation teacher. So, luckily I started at a young age. I think we can start at any age, but obviously the brain solidifies more and more as we get older. We have a harder time changing our perceptions and beliefs. And so I'm glad that I started early. I think that gave me a bit of an edge.
So, it's interesting you were saying around 22 is when you were kind of getting all that stuff out of your system. And I wonder how much of the meditation earlier in life kind of helped you to start your life a little bit more clearly at 22. I mean, I was more around 26 when I realized I wasn't invincible, that I wasn't immortal. So yeah. It's interesting, that you kind of got a little bit more of a head start there. And India, man, that's an incredible place I've never been to before, but obviously rich in history and spirituality and stuff that I'm super drawn to. So really cool experiences you must have had.
Yeah, I'm taking a group back to India in September, actually. So I've been back many times. Yeah, it's the worst of places and the best of places.
Yeah.
The income inequality, the poverty, the pollution is brutal, but also the beauty, the people, the culture, the deep spiritual traditions are really special. So it's quite a melting pot. And you do have to have some resilience to be able to move through that place and not pull your hair out.
Sure. But I mean, that kind of draws on the idea that even when you have little, if you're surrounded by the right things and the right people, that makes all the difference in the world. And I had a similar experience. I lived in Hong Kong for 2 years, and the differences, especially in terms of individuality and community, are incredible. And I spoke with a friend of mine recently on a previous episode about travel and how important it is to get out of your comfort zone. But being in Hong Kong and seeing a culture of people that prioritize connection over materialism, and taking care of the group has always really resonated with me. And it makes me ache a little bit for that part of my life that got to experience it. I mean, especially now in 2025, the world that we live in the Western world is pretty chaotic, you know?
Yeah, it's very isolating. I think
Yeah.
loneliness is one of the worst epidemics that we have in the West, and I agree with you. In the East, it's much more a collective consciousness, which has its positive aspects and obviously its negative ones. And I learned a lot from being with people there who did prioritize relationships. I have a nonprofit in Nepal where we have an orphanage. We have about 35 kids, and so that's one of the ways that I try and stay connected to that part of the world and, make sure I'm not just taking every time I go, but giving something back. And I think to keep myself sane, I'll try and always go back to the developing world, if we can call it that, almost every year. What I've found is they're they don't have as much like a ego structure in their personalities, like the individuality or white people in the West. You get in an elevator, everyone's super awkward. Bye, thank you, sorry, sorry, excuse me, sorry, thank you, excuse me, and there's just like this awkwardness. And in a lot of other places, they just don't have that. They'll grab your hand even if you're a stranger, and they'll smile at you and just talk to you and ask you a very pointed, direct question. Why does your face look like that?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
I love
There's
that.
so much more humility and generosity.
Yeah,
That really is very humbling, and what an amazing thing to want to continue to give back in that way. I mean, you read about stuff like that all the time. You hear about how important and how life changing it can be of service to other people and to give, and how much you get in return. And it's still a very difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people to practice. I mean, speaking of isolation, also, I've had a couple of strange, difficult years, and I find that after I've gone through something pretty deep and heavy and quote unquote traumatic, I tend to isolate rather than really reach out and try to bind to the people in my life that I love and that are non-judgmental. And it just seems that there's such a stark contrast with the Eastern kind of philosophies and
but I've even seen the East becoming Western, like in
mm,
India, it's becoming a rising superpower and they're coming into a lot of wealth at the moment. And so last time I went, it was very different. Everyone was on their phones, doom scrolling like the rest of us, fancy airports, nice cars. It really has shifted. Not everywhere, of course, but in a lot of places. And I was like, uh-oh, it's spreading.
technology is a blessing and a curse, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it kind of brings people together, but it really separates us more so. Yeah,
Yeah.
blessing
That's
and a
what I
curse.
that's what I saw. So, higher and higher in the Himalayas I go.
Yeah, I actually did a trip to Mount Kilimanjaro in January with my brother. We trekked all the way to the top, and it was the first time in, gosh, probably since I've had a phone where I did not have the ability to use a phone for anything unless I wanted to use up the rest of my battery. And aside from taking pictures, that kind of being present with yourself, I found extraordinarily difficult and uncomfortable. I almost found myself coming back 12 days later, overindulging in the things that I was missing out on to kind of balance it back out, which is crazy and terrible. So, I mean, that brings me to another question for you. I mean, your teaching style is very grounded and practical and even funny. So, uh, it's not always the case, I think, in the meditation space. What do you say to people who feel like they're bad at meditation or just don't connect with the more traditional styles?
Yeah, I think there's nothing more practical than being in touch with reality.
Hmm.
And if you're lost in ruminating thoughts all day, every day, you're just not in touch with reality. You're just living in a mental dream. And so it doesn't matter if you're from India, Hong Kong, the US, or another planet in another solar system. If you're lost in your head, you're lost in your head. And so meditation is just a very practical tool to separate your awareness from your thoughts. And when there's a space between your awareness and your thoughts, and you're not lost in the theater of the images going on in your head all the time, that's when you can relax and maybe release some anxiety, which is, You got loneliness and anxiety, probably the two most difficult things for modern people to deal with. These two huge epidemics, and so when you can overcome all of those ruminating thoughts, that's when those energies start to relax and heal. So, from a very practical standpoint, meditation is meant to anchor you into the moment and out of your head, out of constantly being pulled into the future or back into the past. That is really what causes most of our human suffering. So, if it's anything, it's an antidote to suffering.
Sure. I mean, what would you say to people like me included who have a really hard time sitting still? I've attempted meditation in short spurts in the past, but I always find it difficult to sit down, mostly because my body wants to constantly move. There's just so much going on. So what are practical ways in for people like me, or anybody that's interested in being more grounded, being more present, but has a really difficult time getting started?
Yeah, I think it starts with a change in perspective around being uncomfortable. So our entire society is built on avoiding discomfort and having comfort. And that is the crux of the problem. So every time the temperature's off, I make the temperature right. If I don't like something, I avoid it. Every time I'm hungry, I eat. I need to sleep, I sleep. Anything that creates discomfort. I don't like my job. I'm taking a mental health day, whatever. So anything that creates any discomfort, and you'll see the wealthier people get, the more they tend to design their entire lives around never feeling any discomfort. Right. So, I don't like the airport, so I'll take the private jet. Whatever it is, I don't like cooking, so I have a private chef. I don't like a hard bed, so I'll have a $10,000 soft mattress. It's endless. And oddly, the avoidance of discomfort and suffering is what leads to really deep, serious existential suffering.
That makes
And
complete sense. Sorry,
yeah,
yes.
and it's a slow, boiling frog, slippery slope. And that's why the most miserable people on earth are the rich ones, are the wealthy ones. That's always the case. Yeah.
You hear so often these people that accumulate so much wealth ending up not being the happy people. And that makes complete sense what you're saying, that the more you accumulate, the more you seek to make your life as comfortable as possible, which means that you're avoiding all the things that bring you discomfort. And this is what I'm hearing you say really, really well, and that's such a beautiful insight, not to move away from the discomfort, but be okay with it, make friends with it.
And then we go back to meditation. So it's the same. So if you don't feel like you want to sit still and it's uncomfortable and it's painful and painful feelings come up and memories and things you've suppressed and I just have to get things done, I'm anxious. All of those things you have to sit with and sit through to make any progress. So some strategy to avoid that is, missing the whole point. It would be like saying, "Hey, I really don't like exercising and I love eating a lot. So help me create a regimen where I get to keep doing all that and get skinny." Yeah. All right, give me a pill.
Yeah,
So
right.
we've
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah.
We've done it.
Fix it the
Uh,
easy way. Give me the shortcut.
Yeah, exactly. And so sitting still through discomfort is really the core practice. There's a quote that I love: between the banks of pleasure and pain is where the river of life flows. And so think of it as like just really the first 20-30% of the meditation practice. This is the part most people never get through, is they're so uncomfortable with their body and their thoughts and their feelings that 5-10 minutes in, they're just like, "Yeah," and they get up. And really, that's like, let's call it initiation number one. And it's a micro initiation every day that you have to sit through the discomfort, and then eventually the clouds will part and you'll find some stillness and peace. But people, they cannot sit through that first part. It reminds me of when I was 13, I had a bar mitzvah, and in ancient times, that means you became a man because the life expectancy was like 35.
Right, right.
So, like, all right, you're like a third of the way done here.
Better get
More.
to it.
You better, yeah, you start having kids soon. It was a real initiation. And in most cultures, tribal cultures, the Maoris in Africa, in the Amazon, there's usually an initiation that young people, often boys, but women perhaps sometimes too, have to go through where maybe their life is threatened, or they have to eat some plant medicine, or they have to go kill an animal if they're, a tribe that hunts. They have to do something to face their fear and to overcome their discomfort. And that initiation is the first step into growing up to being an adult. And what I'm seeing in our society is this Peter Pan syndrome, I guess you can call it, of never actually growing up to be an adult. I had a friend recently say that she would never date a man under 40. I was like, I mean, 40. All right, we've been dating since we were 15. Holy cow, 25 years. And so what she was saying was they're not growing up. And if you avoid discomfort and pain, you don't grow up. And so I think that there's an epidemic of that. And so meditation is a way we practice every single day, sitting in discomfort and accepting it. And then that acceptance of it, actually, it'll bring us a message, teaching, and then it'll subside. And it won't subside until you face it. You might suppress it. And a teacher of mine would always say, you can't suppress anything successfully forever. So eventually the toothpaste will come out of the bottle when you explode at work, or when you have a panic attack, or when you start a new addiction. It will come up. And so it's better, just like exercise, you can die from heart disease one day too early in life, or cancer, or you can take care of yourself now and play the long game. And so if you deal with the discomfort and pain every single day, then it doesn't accumulate in the way it does in other people, and it doesn't manifest as disease, or some mental affliction that you can't get out of. And so this stuff really does accumulate. It's never too late to start. But if you don't face it every day, it will compound and it will rear its ugly head, and life will shit all over you.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm guilty of that for sure.
Yeah.
As a result of that, there have been a lot of masks that I put up, and after a while, your body knows. Your body
Yeah.
knows, and if you listen, this stuff will come to the surface, and it's up to you to kind of deal with that in being in reality. I think, for me anyway, it's always like a mindset of, I got to be 0 to 60. I got to sit down. I got to meditate for an hour and a half each day, or otherwise it's not going to be something, or I guess it's an impatience thing. But it sounds like initiate the practice 5 to 10 minutes a day, or even 2 minutes, and build on that. And eventually you're going to tease this stuff up to the surface that's already there, but that maybe is just part of your subconscious. But
Yeah.
it's very powerful.
That 0 to 60, often I'll see that in people who have addiction issues too.
Mm-hmm.
You go from 0 to total intensity. And all addiction is, as someone put it, a way to avoid pain. All addiction is trying to avoid pain. I don't like this moment, so I'll eat, I'll drink, I'll play video games, whatever it is, doom scroll until my eyes turn blood red, bleeding out of my ears, and then I fall asleep. So all addiction is the avoidance of pain, and at a certain point it becomes uncontrollable, right? And the hardest thing to do is to take back your energy and your control. But the pain of the at the end of the tunnel is never worth it. And so that's the hard part when we're trying to get that short-term dopamine, or that short-term avoidance of pain, is it leads to long-term destruction. And pain is the ultimate wake-up call in life. And the less you listen, the louder and louder and louder it gets.
It's just that it compounds over time.
Yeah, and also the events could get bigger.
Yeah.
It might start off as something small, and then you lose your job, or someone breaks up with you, somebody dies, someone gets cancer. Like, gets louder when we don't listen, and it'll drag us through the mud until we do. And so I always go back to the teachings of the Buddha around that. He saw pain and suffering, people getting old, sick, and dying, and was like, what the hell is this life about? Why do we all suffer? And then he went out and sat for 6 years and got his answers, and found there was a way out of there's not a way out of pain. Pain is part of life. That if anyone tells you there's a way out of pain, they're lying. But you don't have to suffer so much. Uh, so the suffering tends to come with the rumination, the stories, and the resistance to the pain. So suffering to me is resistance to pain.
It makes complete sense. And a lot of the time, it's not even physical pain, it's mental pain. It's that accumulation of stuff that puts a knot in
Yeah.
your stomach and causes you to spin out in your thoughts, which are things that the interesting thing to me is that I think that I have a very good grasp of understanding all of this stuff. And yet I still kind of stand in my own way. I find it difficult to allow myself to sit with it. Do you find that to be something that a lot of people struggle with when you're teaching this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake is we think we have a grasp of it because we intellectually understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, I read a book on swimming, so I get it. And then you throw me in the ocean and I sink like a fucking stone. And so there's really no getting it outside of the moment. I think that's the illusion. It's like I got it before, once or a bunch of times. I understand it, so I get it. And there really is no getting it outside of this moment. So that would be getting it becomes a form of avoidance.
For sure, because it feels like you're
Yeah.
checking a box and then we can move on to the next thing, as opposed to this is a continuous thing. This doesn't stop because
I got it.
yeah.
Ruminating is caused by anxiety. I got it.
Yeah.
It's like exercise. You're doing it or you're not doing it. Getting it, it's just in the head. And so a meditator always just learns to face the energy in the moment. You have to face the energy in the moment, and it's 10,000 steps. It's endless. It's like maintenance, like keep the jungle from overtaking. It's not something you achieve and then you're like golden. It's much more like pulling the weeds back every single day.
There's always more to discover.
Yeah.
And if you're not discovering, you're no longer alive.
Yeah, and if you don't deal with the pain, it'll get infected like a wound, and then it'll spread, and then you're like, "Why am I mean to my friends?" Or "Why am I selfish? What is this addictive behavior?" And you can't even find the root cause anymore because the infection spread, and it spread from some wound that you didn't, pay attention to, and now it's so compounded. It'll take 10 therapists in a few lifetimes.
Peel back all of those layers to figure out the root causes.
Yes.
Man, that all resonates so much with me. I love all that. Yeah. You talk a lot also about creativity. How does a consistent mindfulness practice support creative flow, especially for people who feel blocked or burnt out or out of sync with themselves?
Yeah, most of the thoughts we have, I'm making this up, 98% of them are repetitive noise.
Yeah.
And finding a creative thought is like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
And so even if you have one, it's so covered up by the storm of noise. And so as a meditator, when some of that noise subsides, then something interesting, I almost imagine it like a bubble coming up, like an air bubble in water. Something interesting goes, oh, there's room up there. I'll rise up to the surface from the unconscious and give her a present. Here's an insight. And so we have insight, from our mind's eye. So maybe we see the world with our two physical eyes. We close them, and then with our mind's eye, we see our inner world. And most people, this ability is in atrophy. It's like a really weak muscle. You should be able to lift 100 pounds, and you're doing like 5. And it's just because we're given images all day long through social media, TV, everywhere. We're just hammered with images. And we're not using this muscle to see inwards and to have our own insight. And so when we meditate, that muscle gets stronger. So you can not just have a thought, but you can have a vision. You can, maybe not just a thought, but an insight, an inspiration, an aha moment, a lightning strike. And to do that, you have to create enough mental, emotional space for it to land. And if you're just lost in thought, ruminating, struggling, there's nowhere for it to land or to come up from the unconscious. So a good meditator should be a creative person because there's space now. And so one of the reasons we meditate is because we want to create something in life. And so I'm going to sit still, find some peace, and then let's see what the next thing that wants to emerge is.
Yeah, you're so right about the doom scrolling, and you know, it's it's almost impossible not to compare yourself and the ideas you think you have with what you're inundated by constantly. It's more difficult than ever to turn the volume down on that noise. I mean, what do you have
Yeah.
suggestions for people to begin to kind of quiet that noise? I mean, we can turn our phones off, which is difficult to do, but I don't know. Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, usually those kinds of things always fail.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'd rather move in the positive than the negation of the negative.
Mm.
Yes, on average, a person checks their phone about 144 times a day. So if you can at least start to bring mindfulness to the feeling that you have when you go to grab it, might be like a compulsion or an anxiety, and a way again, a negative feeling comes up, instead of feeling it, you're like, "I'm gonna grab a distraction." It's almost like grabbing potato chips when you're having a feeling, but now it's images. So an image from my unconscious wants to arise of some pain I experienced. I don't wanna experience it, I need to suppress it. So I pull out a device that hits me with a whole bunch of other images that elicits other feelings, and then that one gets buried again. So it really is a way to keep burying the stuff that wants to come up, and we call it avoidance, distraction, indulgence are forms of avoidance. And so I would say you should be intrigued and curious by that and go, oh well, there's something I'm trying to avoid. I'm actually going to sit, close my eyes, and invite it. Like, come out, come up, come in. What is this feeling that I'm trying to avoid? And let it wash over you. And as uncomfortable as that is, that's where the freedom is, on the other side. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. You can use the phone less. You can eat better. But you don't deal with that unconscious pain. It will drive you. It'll, it'll
So
drive you off a cliff.
when you're in that kind of meditative space where something's bothering you, and rather than pulling for the distraction, you decide to sit with it. Are you playing more of an observer of these things that are coming through, or are you actively kind of having a dialogue in your head about what this is? You know, is there a right or wrong way to kind of approach it?
Yeah, definitely not a dialogue. Much more of the observer, the
Yeah,
feeler, and the, let's say, the honest feeler.
yeah.
Um, and so a dialogue might just be your ego talking it out. You can't. Who are you having a dialogue with? And so there are parts of ourselves that emerge. There's the part that commentates on everything, the part of us that complains, the part of us that's always worried, the part that's always anxious. And they do have voices. So they break off the part of us that's a protector. And so it argues, right? It blames. You want to be aware of all of those parts, and where they're coming from, and notice the words are far less important than the energy that animates the part. So if this part is like, oh my God, I have to pay the bills, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that. All right, that's an anxious part. That's a part that's manifesting from some anxiety. Then I would sit and be with it and feel the anxiety and trace it back, and just sit with and ask a really powerful question, like, where is this anxiety actually coming from? And then let the anxiety itself teach you. So a teacher I love would say our anxiety and our wisdom are made of the same material. So a lot of meditators make the mistake of thinking I have to get around the thinking and around the anxiety to my answer. And the truth is, the answer is inside the anxiety. There's nowhere to get around. So as Robert Frost would say, the only way around is through. And so we want to actually ask the anxiety, why are you here? What are you here to teach me? Why do you keep coming back? What am I not seeing? And then I would just sit with that. And, I've sat with things for hours. Sometimes I've taken 2 hours and then finally the nut cracks. It doesn't always happen in 5 minutes.
So patience is also a part of this process, it seems.
Yeah.
And does that, could that potentially be multiple
Yes.
experiences of meditating, not necessarily sitting down and expecting that no matter how long it's going to take, I'm going to sit here until it comes to, the
It
top of my
could
head.
be it could be hundreds of times
Yeah, yeah.
of chipping away at it, of
And
being
being
with it.
okay with that this is just, you're in the present, this is the process. And you should be continuing to kind of learn more about yourself and where this stuff is coming from.
And that's why we go to therapy too, right? Sometimes we need some external help, but just speaking from the meditative side of it, it might take 100 sits until your anxiety feels safe enough to tell you its origin. Like it doesn't trust you to integrate it back in and to love it. So if you have judgment or resistance towards your own anxiety, you're rejecting it. And it's a part of you. And so all you're doing is rejecting a part of you, which pushes it further away. And now you're alienating yourself from your own feelings. Because people will always tell me, I'm not an anxious person. I just have anxiety. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't need to alienate yourself from your own feelings. The anxiety is a reflection of where you're at here. So instead, pull it closer. And anxiety is always a surface level energy. It's the top layer of the cake. There's always something deeper underneath it that is radiating off of that needs and wants attention. And so as a meditator, if you're feeling anxiety, you're like, oh, okay, I've got some layers here. I'm going to sit still and see what's underneath that and start to peel them back. That's how I always like to approach it.
That's all so beautifully said, Dave. Thanks for laying it out that way. I mean, it makes complete sense. Before I turn it over to you to guide us in a short meditation, what is something about your own practice or your relationship with it that continues to evolve or even surprise you, having done it for so long?
Yeah, I think it's around humanity and the acceptance of being a mortal, temporary, flawed human being, and all of that is unavoidable. I think most of us live in some kind of illusion that this thing is avoidable, that heaven is going to save me when I die, or avoiding thinking about it is going to save me, that something is going to save me from the temporariness of this human experience. And to me, that is a deep form of resistance. And so instead, what happens if you just lean into your humanity and see where that goes? And I think most people are living kind of in a gray zone, in a maybe between yes and no. They're not fully saying yes to life, and a full no, we would call that like suicide. I'm out. I'm out. And so we're mostly living in kind of like okay, I'll deal with another day, another hour, another person. And we're not really accepting and embracing our humanity. And that is where I find meditation the most useful. And it is not something you ultimately accomplish. It's like a flower. A flower doesn't go, all right, I've opened, I'm done. It's like, no, it has it opens, and then slowly it dies, goes back into the soil. So it's a process versus an end goal. So I think that idea that there's an end goal, something we could drop and then be much more in the process. And I think that's how you live a more anxiety-free life, is you face the reality of your mortality and your humanness, and you go, this is the wave I'm surfing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So well said. Man, you've got some incredible insights, and I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Um,
sure.
so if this conversation resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out the Grounded Sleep podcast or visiting meditationschool.us, where you can explore Dave's guided meditations, courses, and even teacher training programs. And now, as promised, we're going to close with a short 2-minute meditation led by Dave. Whether you're walking, driving, or sitting still, this is just a chance to pause and land where you are. So if it's safe to do so, feel free to close your eyes and Here's Dave.
All right. Yeah. Eyes open or closed, wherever you are at the moment. If you're doing open heart surgery, maybe pause and then come back. Other than that, I want you to just take a moment. Like I said before, as you close your physical eyes, you open that inner eye. Where- With the inner eye, we can see in. That's why we call it insight, to see in. So I want you to just find the light switch in your head, turn it on, or light a candle. Maybe it's been really dark in here for a while. So turn the light on and find a comfortable place to sit in the center of your head, nice cushion. And just recognize that this is the home of your consciousness inside your body, in your human form. And you, just like you have the ability to look out at the outer world, you also have the ability to look inward and master your inner world. And so right now, just one question. What is it in my inner world that needs mastering next? Ask yourself that question. Is it a character flaw? Is it a feeling you're avoiding? Is it over rumination, addiction? Just ask that question. What is it in my inner world here that needs mastering and attention? And just allow it to arise, just like I was mentioning earlier, an air bubble coming up through the water. It might even surprise you. Oh, wow, I didn't think it was going to be that. And once you start to even get a general sense of what it is, just acknowledge it. I want you to validate it. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just the next step on your path that wants more of your energy and attention. And when you fulfill it, when you work with it enough, something else might arise. So see if you can accept it as a beautiful next step instead of a problem with who you are. Let's have that shift of perspective. You've probably done other things really well in life, and this one just needs some more nurturing. And you can get almost like a peripheral sense of the support that you might need, restructuring your life, meditating more. Just validate whatever support structure you need to accomplish this. And have some gratitude for yourself for where you are on your path. You're right where you need to be. And you can start to enjoy this journey of humanity more. The imperfection is not a problem or a defect. It's actually the point. So our enlightenment is in our ability to accept our imperfections, not to make them perfect. And the paradox is when we accept them, that's when they actually start to shift, heal, and grow. That's the great paradox of being a human being. So embrace that, acknowledge it, maybe you bow to it. Take a nice big deep breath. And then a nice loud sigh out. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and stretch. And that was 45 minutes. You just fell asleep.
Oh, Dave, you're an amazing human being. And again, I so appreciate you being here with me. I definitely feel relaxed and tuned in. I need to do a lot more of this.
Good.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Matt. It was a true pleasure.
So if this episode helped you in any way, I'd love it if you shared it with someone else who might need it too. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and be kind to yourself. This is Mental Notes with Matt, and I'll see you soon.